The night I drove to my son's house, the world already felt smaller. The divorce papers were signed, my 30-year marriage ended with the faint scratch of a pen and a secretary's perfume lingering in my husband's office. I told myself I'd be fine until I found myself standing on Daniel's doorstep, clutching an overnight bag that suddenly weighed more than my entire life. He opened the door like a man answering a stranger. No hug, no warmth, just eyes I didn't recognize, sharp, impatient, and cold. "Mom," he said flatly, "we weren't expecting you." Behind him stood Jessica, perfectly put together, diamonds catching the porch light. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Olivia," she said, tasting my name like it was bitter. How unexpected. I forced a smile. "I just need a few days. The apartment isn't ready yet." Daniel and Jessica exchanged a look, that silent, married telepathy that always made me feel like an outsider. Then he stepped aside. "Actually, Mom, this is a good time. We need to talk." The living room was nothing like the one I'd known. The family photos were gone, replaced by abstract art and sterile furniture. I sat where they told me, gripping my bag like a shield. Jessica crossed her legs, her voice smooth and rehearsed. "Olivia, it's time we were honest." Honest about what? Daniel leaned forward, his tone turning formal, businesslike. "We've been waiting for this. Robert's gone, and it's time to move forward without your interference." I blinked. "Interference? I don't understand." Jessica smiled, the kind of smile meant to cut. "You never do, dear. Who do you think introduced Robert to that little secretary? Who made sure he stayed late? We didn't just wait for the divorce. We made it happen." The words hit harder than any courtroom verdict. My own son, my own daughter-in-law. "Why?" was all I could manage. Daniel stood, pacing like a man giving a presentation. "Because you were in the way. The company should have been mine years ago. Robert would have left it all to you, and we couldn't let that happen." "I never wanted the company," I whispered. "You know I'd have given it to you." "Would you?" Jessica mocked. "Or would you have played the grieving widow, clutching power you didn't understand?" I felt my hands tremble. "I raised you, Daniel. I gave you everything." "And we're grateful," Jessica said sweetly. "But gratitude doesn't pay for progress. We've decided you don't belong in this new chapter." Daniel walked to the door and opened it. "I think it's time for you to go, Mom." I stood on unsteady legs, glancing once toward the hallway where my grandchildren's photos still hung. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Anywhere but here," Jessica said from the living room. "We're changing the locks tomorrow. You're not family anymore." The door closed behind me, and for a long moment I couldn't move. The night air was cold against my skin, and the sound of my son's laughter drifted faintly through the door. The same laugh I'd once loved. I walked to my car, my fingers tight around the handle of that worn leather bag. Inside it were the last pieces of a life I no longer had. A few clothes, an old photo, and the quiet resolve of a woman who had finally lost everything. But beneath the shock and humiliation, something else stirred. A pulse of something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't despair, it was the beginning of purpose. The Sunset Motel wasn't much to look at. A flickering neon sign, peeling paint, and the faint smell of bleach that never quite covered the sadness. $28 a night, weekly rates available. It was the first roof I'd paid for on my own in more than 3 decades. I sat on the edge of the thin mattress, staring at my phone. 3 hours earlier, I'd been a mother looking for comfort. Now I was a discarded woman wondering what she'd done to deserve it. A text from my neighbor blinked across the screen. "Saw moving trucks at Daniel's house. Everything okay?" Moving trucks. They weren't wasting time. While I sat in this motel, they were redecorating my son's house and my husband's company, rewriting the story of my life without me. When my laptop booted up, I found 3 new emails waiting. One from my attorney, divorce finalized. One from the bank, a large withdrawal from our business account. and one from Patricia Williams, our longtime accountant. Subject line, urgent. Please call me. Her voice trembled when she answered. Mrs. Morrison, they're here. Daniel and Jessica. They took over the office today. Fired people. Changed everything. What do you mean, changed everything? They're spending money like water. Redecorating, hiring consultants, canceling contracts. Mrs. Morrison, they're dismantling the company Robert built. I pressed my hand against my forehead, trying to breathe. Patricia, document everything. Every expense, every decision. Quietly, she hesitated. Are you coming back? I looked around the motel room, the cracked wallpaper, the hum of the air conditioner. Not yet, but don't lose faith. When the call ended, the silence settled heavy. They hadn't just taken the company. They were erasing everything Robert and I had created. My phone rang again. My sister Marie from Phoenix. I heard about the divorce. Are you all right? I laughed, bitter and small. Not really. I went to Daniel's for comfort. They threw me out. Her silence said everything. Olivia, that's unforgivable. Come here, stay with me. For a moment, I almost said yes. But something inside me, the same quiet flame that had carried me through raising Daniel alone, building a business from nothing, whispered, not yet. After we hung up, I turned back to my laptop. For hours, I dug through contracts and old records, the details Robert had always handled. The longer I read, the more I realized how little Daniel understood about the company he thought he owned. Every major contract, the Ricks account, the Patterson Group, Morrison Manufacturing, all carried the same parent signature, Morrison Holdings. Not Morrison Industries, the company Daniel had inherited. The names blurred in my vision. Had Robert protected me somehow? My heart raced as I scrolled through the incorporation documents. There it was, buried in legal phrasing and tax jargon. Morrison Holdings, the parent company, created 15 years earlier. And the sole owner of Morrison Holdings, Olivia Morrison. I stared at the screen, disbelieving. Could it be true? Had Robert known this day would come? I found Marcus Webb's number, Robert's old attorney. He answered on the second ring. Olivia, it's late. Are you all right? I need to ask about Morrison Holdings. There was a long pause. Are you somewhere private? Yes, he sighed. Then it's time you knew. Robert asked me to keep certain details confidential unless absolutely necessary. I believe that time has come. My heart thudded in my chest. Robert structured everything under Morrison Holdings with you as the sole owner. Morrison Industries, the company Daniel believes he runs, is just a subsidiary. It can't legally operate without your authorization. I sank onto the bed, the room spinning. So, he doesn't own anything? Only an empty shell, Marcus said softly. Robert wanted to protect you. From him. From anyone who might try to take what you helped build. I thought of Daniel's face as he told me to get out. Jessica's smirk, the door slamming shut. Does Daniel know? No, Robert never told him. He was going to, after the divorce was finalized. But then the heart attack happened. The grief I'd buried for weeks hit me fresh. Robert had died protecting me. And I'd never even known. Marcus, I whispered, what happens if Daniel spends the money in Morrison Industries' account? He'll run out quickly. Without Holdings' support, that company has maybe 3 weeks before cash flow collapses. I stared at the cracked motel wall, tears burning behind my eyes, but this time, they weren't from sorrow. Robert left instructions, Marcus continued. Documents, records, and a letter explaining everything. They're in a safe deposit box under your name. He wanted you to have them when you were ready to take control. Control, I repeated, the word tasting new and dangerous on my tongue. That night, as the flickering motel sign painted red light across the window, I finally understood. I hadn't lost everything. I'd inherited the power to change everything. The next morning, the world felt different, sharper, deliberate, full of quiet purpose. I met Marcus Webb at the bank as soon as it opened. The air inside smelled faintly of polished wood and old secrets. He was already waiting, a leather briefcase beside him. Olivia, he said gently, are you ready for this? I've been ready for a long time, I replied. I just didn't know it. Inside the private conference room, the bank manager unlocked a small safe deposit box and slid it across the table. Inside were 3 items, a stack of legal documents, a sealed letter in Robert's handwriting, and a single brass key. My hands trembled as I opened the letter. "My dearest Olivia," it began, "if you're reading this, it means the moment I feared has come. You were always the heart of this company. Your kindness built it as much as my ambition did. I've placed Morrison Holdings entirely in your name, not out of distrust, but love. If Daniel ever loses his way, you'll have the means to protect what we built. Use it wisely." I closed the letter, unable to stop the tears that fell silently onto the page. Marcus unfolded the documents with practiced precision. "Robert built you an empire," he said quietly. "Holdings owns everything, the buildings, the warehouses, the assets, and most importantly, the contracts. Daniel's company exists only because yours allows it." The power of that realization left me breathless. Just hours earlier, I'd been sleeping on a sagging motel mattress, humiliated and powerless. Now I sat holding the fate of my son's empire in my hands. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Daniel and Jessica have no idea. They think they're in control. But if you withdraw Holdings' support, Morrison Industries will collapse within weeks." I looked out the window, at the sunlight glinting off parked cars. "Then it's time they learn the truth," he hesitated. "Olivia, Robert built this structure to protect you, not to destroy Daniel." I nodded slowly. Protection and justice aren't always opposites. By afternoon, Patricia had sent me the latest reports from the office. The numbers were worse than even Marcus predicted. Lavish spending, reckless firings, contracts hanging by threads. Jessica was redecorating the executive suite with marble and imported tile while Daniel pitched aggressive expansion to investors who barely remembered his name. Their arrogance was eating them alive. That night, in my motel room, I spread the papers across the small table, contracts, ownership records, tax filings, until the entire story of our company lay before me like a battlefield map. For the first time in months, my mind was clear. I wasn't just a discarded wife or a mother left behind. I was the owner, the architect, the woman Robert had trusted to carry forward what he'd built. A text buzzed on my phone. "Daniel, hope you found somewhere to stay. Maybe we were too harsh. Let's talk tomorrow. We can work something out." I stared at the message for a long moment. Yesterday, I would have taken it as a lifeline. Tonight, it was bait, and I finally knew who was holding the hook. I typed a single reply. "I'll think about it," but my thoughts weren't about reconciliation. They were about consequence. The following morning, I walked into Marcus's office again, carrying a folder thick with documents. "I've reviewed everything," I said, "and I want to move forward." Marcus regarded me carefully. "You understand what that means, Olivia. Once you act, there's no going back." "I'm not looking back," I said. "Not anymore," he smiled faintly. "Then let's make it official." The paperwork was clinical, almost deceptively simple. 1 signature and the future of 2 lives, 3, if you counted mine, shifted irrevocably. Marcus reviewed the numbers. "They've already spent over $60,000 on renovations, hired 2 consultants, and started a new marketing campaign. They have maybe 2 weeks of operating cash left," I nodded. "Then by Monday, I'll take back what's mine." As I left his office, the sun was setting, the kind of golden light that turns glass into fire. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small or invisible. I felt powerful, calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks. That weekend, Patricia called again. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, her voice tinged with cautious excitement, "Daniel's calling emergency meetings. They've started asking about missing funds." "Good," I said softly. "Let them wonder." When I hung up, I thought about Robert, about the quiet strength he'd always seen in me, even when I'd only seen duty. Maybe this was what he'd known all along, that I could survive anything, even betrayal. As the night deepened, I packed my things from the motel room, not in shame this time, but with purpose. By Monday morning, I would no longer be the woman standing outside her son's house. I would be the woman walking back into her own. By Monday afternoon, Morrison Industries buzzed with nervous energy. I arrived just after lunch, pulling into the parking space that had once belonged to Robert. The building gleamed under the noon sun, cold, impersonal, expensive. Jessica's taste was everywhere. White marble floors, chrome fixtures, a sterile perfection that felt more like a showroom than a business. A young receptionist I didn't recognize looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Visitors need an appointment." "I'm not a visitor," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I'm Olivia Morrison. I own this building." She blinked, unsure what to say, when Patricia appeared from the elevator. Relief washed over her face. "Mrs. Morrison, thank goodness you're here." Patricia led me to a small conference room. "Things have gotten worse," she whispered. "Daniel's fired 3 more people. He's pitching to investors who don't even understand what they're buying. Jessica's spending on interior design like it's a royal palace." I opened my folder and handed her the papers. "Prepare termination notices for all subcontracting agreements between Morrison Holdings and Morrison Industries." "Effective immediately," Patricia froze. "All of them?" "Every single one. Holdings will assume direct control of all client relationships starting next week." Her expression shifted from fear to fierce loyalty. "Understood." For the next 2 hours, we reviewed contracts, accounts, and staff lists. Every page was a reminder of how much had been built and how quickly greed could destroy it. At exactly 4 o'clock, Daniel burst into the room. His tie was loosened, his face flushed from stress. "Mom," he snapped, "you can't just show up here. You need permission to be in this building." "Permission from whom?" I asked evenly. "From me. I own this company now." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Daniel, you own Morrison Industries. But this building, the contracts, the assets, they belong to Morrison Holdings. And I own Morrison Holdings." He stared at me, unblinking. "That's not possible." I opened the folder and slid the incorporation documents toward him. Robert made sure it was not only possible but permanent. He grabbed the papers, flipping through them with shaking hands. His face went pale as the truth settled in. "This can't be legal." "It's perfectly legal," I said. "And as of today, Morrison Holdings is terminating every subcontract with your company." "You can't do that." "We'll lose everything." I stood, gathering my papers calmly. "You already did, Daniel. You just didn't realize it until now." He sank into a chair, his voice breaking. "I'm your son." "Yesterday, that didn't seem to matter," I said quietly. "Yesterday, I was an embarrassment you wanted gone." His phone buzzed. He looked down, reading a message, then muttered, "Jessica's on her way." When Jessica arrived 20 minutes later, the sound of her heels echoed through the corridor, sharp, self-assured, unaware. She swept into the room with a stack of design catalogs in her arms. "Daniel, the marble for the executive kitchen?" She stopped when she saw me. "What is she doing here?" "Sit down, Jessica," Daniel said weakly. "We need to talk." She stayed standing, her chin high. "If this is about yesterday, Olivia, you're being dramatic. Family disagreements happen, do they?" I asked softly. "Does orchestrating someone's divorce count as a disagreement?" Her confidence faltered for the first time. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The secretary," I said, my tone icy. "The one you recommended?" "The one who worked late nights with Robert." Daniel turned to her, eyes wide. "Jessica, please tell me you didn't." She hesitated, just a fraction too long. Then her mask cracked. "I did what was necessary for our future. Robert was never going to retire, and as long as he was married to her, we'd never get what we deserved." "What you deserved?" I repeated, the words cutting through the room. "You destroyed a marriage, manipulated my son, and threw me out of my own family for a company that was never yours." Jessica's voice trembled with rage. "We can fix this. You can give it to us. You never wanted to run a company. You're too sentimental, too naive." Daniel's tone turned desperate. "Mom, you could sign it all over to me. Let me prove I can rebuild it. You could retire, enjoy your life." I almost laughed. "Yesterday you called me incompetent. Today you want my empire. Tell me, Daniel, which version of me is more convenient?" My phone buzzed. Patricia's message lit the screen. "The Hicks account canceled their contract with Morrison Industries." I looked up at them both. "That was our largest client. They've ended their contract with your company." Daniel shot to his feet. "They can't do that." "They can," I said calmly. "Their agreement is with Morrison Holdings. And I just ended the subcontract." Jessica's voice rose to a scream. "You're destroying us!" "No," I said softly. "I'm giving you the same freedom you gave me. The freedom to figure out where you belong when everything's been taken away. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air felt thick with the weight of truth. Jessica was the first to break. "We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers. We'll prove you're unfit." "Good luck," I said, gathering my papers. "You'll need to pay those lawyers with money you don't have, fighting a case you can't win, against the woman who owns every brick beneath your feet." I walked to the door. Daniel's voice followed me, small, broken. "Mom, please, we can fix this. We can be a family again." I turned to face him one last time. "Family isn't blood, Daniel. It's respect, loyalty, and love. You traded all of that for money. Now you'll live with the cost." As I stepped out into the corridor, I passed the receptionist, Sarah, who looked up nervously. "Mrs. Morrison, will you be coming in regularly now?" I smiled faintly. "Yes, and if you'd like to learn real estate management, Morrison Holdings could use someone like you." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Really." As I walked through the lobby toward the doors, I didn't look back. Behind me lay the wreckage of greed and betrayal. Ahead of me, the empire I had reclaimed and the power to rebuild it on my own terms. By the end of that week, the empire Daniel thought he owned began to crumble. Patricia sent daily updates. Accounts frozen, contracts terminated, clients returning to Morrison Holdings with relief instead of resentment. Morrison Industries was unraveling, fast. Jessica tried to salvage their image with public charm and designer suits, but investors were backing away. The Hendricks account withdrew next, then the Patterson Group. By the following Monday, their office renovations were half finished and unpaid, and the new consultants had vanished after their checks bounced. Daniel called repeatedly. I didn't answer. 3 weeks later, Morrison Industries filed for bankruptcy. It didn't bring me joy, not the kind I expected anyway. It felt like standing at a grave, one I hadn't dug but had refused to fill in. When the news broke, Patricia brought a copy of the business section to my desk. The headline read, "Morrison Industries collapses amid mismanagement and debt." I stared at it for a long time before folding the paper neatly and sliding it into a drawer. "They did it to themselves," Patricia said softly. "I know," I replied, "but it still hurts." Daniel had inherited a thriving business, one that could have grown stronger under his care. Instead, he'd burned it down chasing the illusion of power. Jessica, ever pragmatic, filed for divorce 2 months later. She moved back to California and was soon engaged again, to a man whose wealth made Daniel look small. It was strange how predictable it all was. Jessica had never loved my son, only the idea of what he could give her. Daniel was left with nothing but debt, shame, and silence. He sent a letter once, handwritten and uncharacteristically careful. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I turned my focus to rebuilding. Morrison Holdings rose quickly from the ashes. The transition was smooth, almost poetic. The clients who had fled Daniel's arrogance returned without hesitation. Mrs. Ricks, elegant and formidable, clasped my hands when we met for lunch. "Your husband always said you were the heart of the company. I see now he was right." Under Patricia's steady leadership, the numbers climbed. The Hendricks account doubled within months. Morrison Manufacturing expanded their contracts, and by the next quarter, our profits were up 37%. We didn't just restore what had been lost, we made it better, smaller, more honest, more human. The new office reflected that: warm wood, sunlight, photos of the people who mattered. The family I had chosen, not the one that had discarded me. I looked around one morning and realized I'd built something that wasn't just Robert's legacy, it was mine. For years, I'd been defined by other people's choices. My husband's infidelity, my son's betrayal, Jessica's cruelty. But standing in that office, surrounded by people who respected me, I finally understood. I hadn't been destroyed. I'd been refined. Still, late at night, when the lights dimmed and the city glittered outside my window, I sometimes wondered about Daniel, where he was, what kind of man he'd become when there was nothing left to take. One afternoon, Patricia stepped into my office carrying a thin envelope. "You should see this," she said quietly. Inside was a short article from the business column. Former Morrison Industries CEO Daniel Morrison joins Jenkins and Associates Accounting Department. Entry-level position. A man who had once boasted of being unstoppable was now starting again at the bottom. I stared at the headline for a long time before setting it down. "I hope he learned something there," I murmured. Patricia hesitated. "Do you regret it?" "No," I said. "He needed to understand what I did, what it's like to rebuild from nothing." She nodded and left me alone with the city view, sunlight flickering on glass towers like silent applause. The revenge was complete. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like release. 3 months after Morrison Industries' collapse, my office window framed a skyline reborn in sunlight. The air carried a sense of peace that felt earned. I stood where Robert once had. Same view, same height, but a different woman behind the glass. The shelves were lined with framed photographs, Patricia and her husband. Sarah, now thriving in client relations, and the team that had stayed through every storm. It wasn't the family I'd started with, but it was the one I'd built. The newspaper on my desk read, "Morrison Holdings acquires 3 major manufacturing contracts." A quiet victory, born from integrity and patience rather than greed. Patricia entered with her usual purposeful stride. "The quarterly numbers are in. We're up 37% from last year. The Hendricks account alone doubled." I smiled. "Robert would have been proud." "He'd have been proud of you," she said softly. I wanted to believe that. And maybe finally, I did. That afternoon, my phone rang. The display read, "Daniel." For a long moment, I just stared at it. Then I answered. His voice was subdued, unfamiliar. "Mom, I know I don't have the right to ask, but could I see you? Just 30 minutes." The pause that followed stretched, full of old pain and fragile hope. "Come by my office," I said finally. 4 o'clock. He arrived exactly on time. The boy I had raised was gone. In his place stood a man who'd learned humility the hard way. His clothes were plain, his expression worn but genuine. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, standing awkwardly by the chair. "I know I don't deserve it." "No," I said quietly. "You don't. But sit." He clasped his hands, fingers trembling slightly. "I wanted to apologize, not to fix things, not to get anything from you. I just need you to know I understand now what I did, what I became." He swallowed hard. "I destroyed my marriage. I ruined the company. I hurt the one person who stood by me when everyone else left. I see that now." I studied him, waiting for the flicker of manipulation I'd seen so often before, but it wasn't there. "Only exhaustion and regret. Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked. He shook his head. It wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing that my son had become a stranger, someone I couldn't even recognize. Tears slipped down his face. "I know. Jessica brought out the worst in me, but I can't blame her. I made those choices. I thought power would make me respected. Instead, it made me empty." I nodded slowly. "You lost everything that mattered." "I did," he said. "And I've had a lot of time to think about what matters now. Working for someone else, budgeting every dollar. It's humbling. It's also the first honest work I've done in years." Silence settled between us, soft and heavy. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "But I needed to tell you that I finally understand what you tried to teach me, that real success isn't about control. It's about decency." I looked at him for a long time before speaking. "The company you destroyed could have been remarkable, Daniel. Robert built it to last. You turned it into a shortcut. But shortcuts always end at cliffs," he nodded, eyes downcast. "I know, and I'm sorry." I took a deep breath. "Morrison Holdings is hiring. We're expanding again." He blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance," I said. "Entry level. You'll report to Patricia, and you'll earn your place like everyone else. If you slip, she'll fire you. And I won't intervene." He stared at me, disbelief mingling with hope. "After everything I did, why would you do that?" "Because despite everything, you're still my son. And because Robert believed people can change, even when it's hard to believe in them." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I don't know if I can be the man you raised me to be. Neither do I said. But now you'll have the chance to find out. 6 months later, we sat at my dining table, smaller than the mansion Daniel once flaunted, but warm and alive. The table was set for 4, Patricia and her husband, Daniel and me. Dinner was simple. Laughter came easily. Patricia smiled across the table. Daniel's analysis of the supply chain saved us almost $200,000 this quarter. I looked at him. His posture was humble, his smile small but sincere. Good work, I said. Thank you, he murmured, for giving me the chance to prove myself. After dinner, while Patricia and Jim moved to the living room, Daniel stayed behind to help with dishes. His hands were steady, deliberate. Mom, he said quietly, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Really forgive me, not just tolerate me? I considered the question, rinsing a plate slowly. Forgiveness isn't a gift, Daniel. It's something people earn, one small act at a time. Every day you choose honesty over pride. Every moment you show the man you're becoming, you earn a little more of it back. He nodded, his expression solemn. Then I'll keep trying, and maybe someday we'll be family again. Not by obligation, but by choice. I smiled faintly. That's all I ever wanted. As he dried the last dish, I watched him, not the man who'd thrown me out of his house, but the man learning what it meant to stand again. Redemption didn't come through revenge. It came through rebuilding, and in saving the company Robert left behind, I'd saved something far more precious, my son. Later that night, I stepped out onto the porch. The city lights shimmered like stars scattered across the horizon. Somewhere below, Daniel was driving home to the small apartment he paid for himself, carrying with him the quiet weight of growth. I closed my eyes, feeling the cool air brush against my skin. For the first time in years, my heart was still. I had been thrown away like garbage. I had been betrayed, broken, forgotten. But in the end, I hadn't just survived. I had built an empire of my own, and from its ashes, found peace. Sometimes the people who break you are the same ones who teach you what you're made of. Olivia lost everything she thought defined her. Her marriage, her home, even her son. But from the ruins, she discovered something stronger. The power of self-worth and the peace that comes when justice doesn't roar. It whispers. In the end, she didn't just reclaim her company. She reclaimed herself. Let us know in the comment, where are you watching from? Please subscribe to the channel Her Side of the Story. Thanks for watching until here.